I have a wonderful guest for you. His name is Dr. Lamar Nardi. Dr. Lamar Nardi is a is a person that I know very well. We went to medical school together. We struggled together. We hustled together into residency together. So if anybody understands what I've been through, he does. If anybody understands what I've been through, he does. Did I say that wrong? Doesn't matter. We're going to keep it moving. Dr. Nadi, it's a pleasure having you here today. How you doing?
Thank you, Dr. Santi, for having me on here. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. Just trying to adjust to our new pandemic world.
Same here, man. This pandemic is driving me nuts at work. Driving me
My,
nuts.
myself too, and I'm infectious disease. I want this to be done more than anybody. I'm tired.
Oh my God. Yeah, right. All right. So tell us what you're doing right now and where you see yourself in the future.
Okay, so what I'm currently doing right now is I'm currently in an infectious disease fellowship, which I started in the summer of 2020. I'm at a program called Northwell Health. It's associated with the Hofstra School of Medicine, Zucker Hillside. And it's a 2-year fellowship. And I'm going to be graduating in about 6 to 7 months, and I'll be practicing infectious disease after that as an attending physician. Where do I see myself in about 5 to 6 years? In terms of my goals, I like to separate them with short-term versus long-term goals. In the short-term goals, I see myself establishing like a patient database, a patient base for myself in a academic hospital setting for several years, and then slowly transitioning to private practice later on in my career.
That sounds exciting, but it's a lot of work. It's not
It's a
easy.
lot of work.
Yeah. All right. So now that we have a decent overview of where you are right now, can you tell us where it all started, what medical school you went to, where it was, so that we can get an idea? Most of my listeners are international medical graduates, so this will help them relate to what you're going through, what you went through.
Okay. So as an IMG myself, I can definitely relate. I finished, I went to college in New York City. I was born and raised here in New York. After college, I applied to medical schools all throughout the United States and also to offshore schools. The reason why I decided to go to an offshore school was because I did not want to delay a year waiting for a repeat application cycle for the American medical schools. So I ended up going to American University of the Caribbean School of Medicine. I started in August of 2010, and I was there until April 2015. I had a 5 year of education just because I had a bit of would say some bumps along the road and also some issues with my rotation timing. So that essentially what led me to finish up in about 5 years. So that's kind of how a little bit about myself. I
Gotcha.
was in the medical school itself is located on the island of Saint Martin, and that's essentially where I spent the first 2 years of my uh, medical school, and then finished my third and fourth year at multiple different clinical sites in the United States.
Right. Yeah, that was one of the wonderful things about going to AUC, going to one of these Caribbean schools. You get to do rotations in different places. I remember I went to England to do my surgery rotation. That was pretty cool.
Right.
You did as well, right?
I did. I was there for 3 months
Yeah,
for
yeah.
surgery
I just be
and
sleeping.
traveling.
Yeah. Definitely traveling, this guy.
We
Wonderful.
traveled.
Wonderful. So you did your medical school, you graduated, you finished your medical school.
Right.
How long, how many application seasons did you have to go through? And
So
which
in
one?
terms of application seasons for residency, I went through 2 cycles. The first cycle was essentially all family medicine. And then my second cycle was internal medicine. And the reason for the change was because I essentially the first time that I went through the cycle, I did not match. So what led me to believe that maybe I should try a different specialty the second time around. So I ended up going for internal medicine.
Okay, so the first time you applied, you only applied to family?
It was only family medicine.
Interesting. Okay. And then the second time you applied, only internal?
Only internal medicine.
Wow. Okay. All right. When I applied, I think the first time around, I always applied to both internal medicine and family medicine. But I think it was always like 90% or 95% family, like 5% internal, because I wasn't really into going into internal medicine. So you applied family first time, internal second time. What do you think went wrong like the first time?
I can attribute it to a couple of different things. I think the major thing was the fact that I had a failure in my medical school transcript with my USMLE exam. It was the clinical skill exam that I took, which was essentially because of poor preparation. That was the biggest reason why I failed that test. That exam now I think is currently gone because of the pandemic. So that was that was the one of the biggest reasons, because I know a lot of the application the hospitals want to see a pass on that the first time. The second thing for me was essentially I thought maybe poor interviewing technique that I attributed to myself, that definitely had a role to play in it. And then the third was just probably because the sheer volume of applicants that I was up against. So I would say these are the big three hallmarks, not matching the first cycle.
You've mentioned the three things that you felt impeded you from getting into residency. How did you overcome these three things the next time you applied?
Okay. So the CS exam, I mean, I overcame it by passing it the second time, preparing it well, getting to really know the test, how the exam worked, essentially, and how I could use that as a strength later on in my life in terms of teaching. So what ended up happening is that I prepared so well for that exam through a prep course that the prep course hired me to teach their students. I was a student for the prep course for about a month, and then I became the teacher right after I passed my exam. So that was one of the greatest things I think that I learned about that. And I still carry with it to myself to this day, which I did during my residency and my fellowship training. The second thing in regards to the poor interviewing technique, I ended up taking an interview course, very like a 2-session course on how to tackle the most common and difficult questions that appear on residency interviews. I understand that a lot of the residency interviews weren't like a lot of different type of job interviews. It actually required certain level of preparation to essentially handle the questions and not be scared by surprises. And then the third, the volume of applicants. I mean, the way I try to navigate that was try and get in contact with programs directly, as opposed to waiting for the program to contact me. So I tried to bypass the 4,000 applicant thing by getting in touch with the program directly and just offering them my CV and my resume if they could take a second look at my application, instead of having them sift through 4,000 applicants and waiting to get to me.
Right. Remember that time when I called the program, I got an interview like 30 minutes after calling them, and I texted you, I was like, listen, you got to call this program. You gotta call them and contact them. And then what happened when you call them?
I got an interview.
There we go. That's
it worked out.
It just happens if you're there at the right time. If you call and you just catch them at the right time, it's possible you can get an interview. You might not get an interview, for most of them you won't, but if you catch them at the right time, you can just get that. All right, so beautiful. So I see you basically sat down, figured out, okay, these are the things that I need to work on, and you went to work on those things. Your CS exam that you failed, you were fully focused on just passing that exam. You ended up passing that exam, and then you went,
right.
and then you had that done. And then for once you passed that exam, you started to teach. And in
Right.
teaching, you showing the residency is a quality that they like to see in their residents. Somebody that teaches, right? Somebody, because the thing is, you go as a doctor, you teach medical students, you teach nurses, you teach patients all the time, and you teach yourself because the study
Right.
never stops. So you did that as well, and then you also made sure you called programs. So you put in a lot of work. Now, that's not the only thing that you did, if I remember correctly. You also did some other jobs. What else? What else did you do?
Well, the biggest challenge during the residency hunt was to support myself financially. So waiting for a job, I had to work a couple other jobs to make ends meet. So a couple other things that I did in terms of, in addition to teaching, I ended up signing up for an EMT school and getting my EMT license just to kind of stay fresh with patient care, just to, although it wasn't in like the resident care level, but however, it was like an entry setting where I was able to manage patients in an emergency setting, which I think helped me greatly in residency, handling a lot of difficult cases and knowing how to manage hard, difficult situations. And then another job that I worked for was also doing scribing. So properly learning how to write notes, which is another big part of training, is learning how to accurately write a note, essentially document everything.
Right,
And these are things that essentially I felt that I was going to need in residency. So I did those jobs to prepare me for it.
right. And was there one more job that you did?
Scribing.
Scribing. But didn't you do what's that job where you review notes just to make?
Oh, that one too. Yeah. So there's a third job that I did, and that was it was called a clinical documentation specialist. So what I did was essentially I took a look at a lot of the billing and insurances and the diagnoses that doctors were putting in their charts, and just correcting ones that are more attributable to the patient to make sure that they were billed appropriately, and also we got the right diagnoses. So essentially helped in more accurate charting.
Right. So, I mean, the reason why I was trying to stress on these things, when you applying, like you said, it's very expensive, and you end up, you have to be able to make some money whilst you also gaining experience. So the things that you went through, I know for sure you gain experience at the same time as you also making some money. I mean, it's not a lot of money now that we are where we are, but it is enough. It is a decent amount of money that can support you and give you some money for applications and so on. So yes, the clinical documentation specialist, I know a few people that actually went through that path. Scribing as well. I also know some people that did that as well. And then EMT. EMT is always fun. I was an EMT when it was after undergrad. I was an EMT for a little bit with the fire department. It was crazy.
Fun, fun job.
It was
Stressful
fun. It
job,
was
but
fun.
fun.
It was fun, man. I have stories for days. You did all of these things to prepare yourself for the next application, right?
Right.
But before we move on to that, how many programs did you apply to in the first application season?
First cycle, I applied for the family medicine, which was more general. It was about 160 programs, 170 programs, I believe, around there, that range.
100.
Second round, I for internal medicine, I kind of cut it by half, more than half, just to kind of gear my chances towards the programs actually I felt like had a chance, as opposed to the first time, which was more of like a shotgun approach.
Okay. So you also focus more on trying to get programs specific to you
Right.
versus just applying broadly. Because
Right.
I know people that apply to like 400 programs, and I mean, well, some of them I know. I also watched some YouTube videos of some people. This girl said she applied to like 400 programs. She just threw money at it, but eventually she matched. I mean, do what you have to do to match. But if you don't have the money, you have to make sure that you're completely targeted.
Right.
And yeah, that's what you did. So okay, so you did all of those things. You call in CS, to teaching, and all those extra jobs that you did. And did you do anything else that you felt helped with applying?
The biggest thing I can attribute is just seeing what my colleagues were going through and what how they were handling their situation. Like getting in touch with programs directly is something I actually picked up from Dr. Asanti, which is a great way to kind of bypass the huge volume of applicants that they get bombarded with every year.
Right, right.
So calling programs was essentially one of the greatest things. I mean, not like harassing them, but just calling them and offering them to take a look at my application.
Right.
And the way I looked at it was it makes their job easy too.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's right. And we were speaking about this earlier, networking, right? The importance of networking.
Okay.
There was a conference. Like I went to a conference my second time applying. I went to a conference. It was the AFP conference. I was lucky enough to get two to three interviews from there. What about you?
Yeah, I went to conference the first time around because I applied for family medicine and I ended up I got a total of about 3 interviews for that season cycle. Two of them were from the conference, just simply by getting to know people
Absolutely.
and interacting with them and going out to dinner with them. It was a wonderful experience.
It was amazing. But it was a lot of work. I remember. I remember it was a lot of work. Before I went there, I sat down, I wrote down all the programs I was going to talk to. And then when I got there, I was like,
We had to prepare. We had to prepare for it.
absolutely. I said, my goodness, there's so many programs. Like seeing each program took some time. Like I couldn't make it to my list, but I saw at least all the programs that I wanted to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did all these things, then you didn't match. How did you feel when you didn't match?
Considering the fact that it happened in the same month as my wedding,
Ah, crap.
and my wife matched into her podiatry program, I was very happy, but deep down
You have to say that.
I was very happy getting married, but deep down, there was also a feeling of disappointment and the fact that my career took a bump on the road. And and the great thing about having a spouse in medicine too is that she helped me really get through it. And she told me, like, listen, like this is not the end of, just apply again next year. So I had to be practical about it and just tell myself I'm going to keep applying until I get something.
Okay, so your mentality was you're not going to give up. You're just going to keep
Yeah,
applying.
just keep going.
Do you feel like there were people that were telling you on the outside, people like your friends, family, or whatever, they were telling you that you should start looking at other things?
I would say not more so my family. At least my immediate family is very supportive. I'd say probably colleagues from medical school, not like from my close group of friends, but just like acquaintances that I know. A lot of them that I reached out to kind of told me like, "Hey, listen, you should consider doing other things." And that to me wasn't enough. Like I told myself, like, if I sit around and listen to people my entire life and not take control of my own, I'm not going to get anywhere. And
Absolutely.
that was my mentality. I said I had to cut out the negativity and just focus on the positive. Meanwhile, find the job where I could support myself, take care of myself until I get to where I need to be. And this is what I learned from Dr. Asante is that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Absolutely.
Some people it takes 1 year, some people it takes 10 years to match, but they'll get it eventually. So now seeing it from the other side makes me want to tell the audience that all hope is not lost.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What I like to tell at least the people that watch my videos is you're going to get people that tell you that, listen, you've tried once, you've tried twice. You should probably start looking at other things. Life goes on, blah, 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 blah. Now, you have to make the decision for yourself if that's what you want to do. But what you also have to understand is you have to take advice from people that are in your shoes, that understand what you're going through, that understand the journey that you're on. Because a lot of people look at it from their perspective. They don't mean any harm, but they look at it from their perspective. And basically, if they didn't make it, they just try to put that on you as well. You have to look at it from yourself, look within yourself if you truly want to keep going. And like what you did, me, whenever I heard those kinds of comments, I always knew that I was I was going to apply again. I would say, and then keep pushing.
Gotta stay hustling.
Yeah. And one thing that I noticed was the second time applying, at least for me, I noticed that, applying didn't just affect me, it affected my whole family, right? Whenever I got a rejection and I told people, I could see it on their faces, like not that they don't believe in you or anything like that, but they feel sad for you that you didn't get the interview and you got a rejection instead. So what I started doing was I started to hide my rejections from them. I wouldn't tell them when I got rejections. I only tell them when I got interviews. So I used to keep that from them just so that, I bore the brunt of the application season because it beats on your emotions. It does. What do you think?
The emotions I felt, I'm sure you've probably felt. There are times where you feel very upset, angry, I guess dejected, discouraged, I guess is the biggest thing. But I told myself every day, like, listen, like I could sit around and carry myself and wallow in this self misery, or I keep making the best of what I do, stay busy with things that I enjoy, whether it's playing video games, watching TV, watching movies, staying in touch with friends that I lost contact with during the years of my medical school training, having family support. These were things that essentially helped me get through the cycle. And I guess the biggest thing I realized is that, like, ultimately you have a goal in mind and you're going to keep going until you reach your goal. And now the way I look at it is medicine is very difficult. It's a very stressful position, no matter what specialty you're in. Could be whether surgery or psychiatry. It's very demanding, and it takes a toll. And in the end, I just treat it as another job.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
don't glorify it to something that I wanted to consume my entire life. I have to realize that I have other people around me that need me.
Mhm, mhm,
And that's the way I look at it.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's not easy, but if you have your goal, at least you know where you're trying to get to, and you
Right.
have the support to make it to that goal. It becomes a little easier, not easy, but a little easier. You didn't make it the first time you applied, which was what, 2016, and then
Mhm.
for the match of 2017, you applied again. And this time, you only applied to internal medicine.
Correct.
All right. Now, how many interviews did you get the first time around again?
3.
3 interviews the first time around. Okay. Then the second time around that you applied, tell us about what happened during the second time you applied.
So I also received 3 interviews my second round. What I changed my game plan was, one, I narrowed the application pool for myself. One, to save money. I wanted to be a little bit smarter with the money. And two, essentially gear it towards the place where I actually had a shot, as opposed to just shotgunning to everywhere. So that was something that I think really helped. In addition to that, I try to get in contact with anybody I knew in the internal medicine specialty, um, to anywhere that I thought I maybe had a shot. So I contacted places like in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, in Queens, and I just essentially gave phone calls. They took a look. I never really got any promises of anything. They just told me that they would take my application and discuss it, and if they like my application, they'll offer me an interview. So that's what happened with Jamaica Hospital, and essentially I went on my interview, and it turned out to be a pre-match program. So I signed right on the spot.
Ah, right, right. You did pre-match. I remember. So you were
Myself
done.
and myself and my colleague, who actually turned out to be our chief resident, we interviewed together, and we just were like, listen, we got like 2, 3 interviews. We're not messing with this. I'm not. Beggars cannot be choosers. You take
Right.
it, and honest to myself, it was hands down probably one of the toughest places I've ever trained in my entire life. And how we got hit with pandemic, now I'm very grateful for the training that I did, because I feel comfortable now.
You feel comfortable anywhere because the kind of training you
Anywhere
get there
because
is
of that
solid.
difficult training.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right. Now, so now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, that's right. You did pre-match. And I was thinking, my goodness, now this guy's done. It's left me. I gotta make it too.
So Dr. Quasi, I kind of left him a bit early into the match. He was on his own, going against the computer algorithm.
All right. And I remember I just kept calling these programs and contacting them multiple times. And I
Right.
got more interviews and I cinched it eventually. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm making these videos for you guys. All right, wonderful. So you did all that stuff. You got your 3 interviews. You pre-matched into Jamaica. If you had to give IMGs that have not done anything yet, right? So we're not even talking about Caribbean IMGs. We're talking about, FMGs that have not done any step exams or anything like that. What would be the 2 most important things that they can make sure that they can handle to make sure that their application season goes a little smoother? From your point of view, I mean, everybody's
Okay,
different.
sure. My point of view is, one is to be patient. Nothing's going to come overnight. They call the step exams for a reason, because they're different steps in an ultimate journey to well fashion you into a physician, whatever specialty you are. So that's the first piece of advice I could say is be very patient with yourself, be patient with your family, be patient with those people around you that are going to be supporting you. Because the struggle is not only yours, it's theirs as well. They would like to see you succeed. So please take it one day at a time. Focus on one topic at a time. Don't jump the gun 3-4 years into the future, because you're just going to psych yourself out and it's not worth it. Take one day at a time. Give yourself an off day if you feel like you're getting overwhelmed with everything.
Right.
That's something I wish I did. The second piece of advice I can say is that as you're being patient, also know thy enemy. Know what you're going to be up against. By what I'm saying, know what you're up against. If you feel like you're weak with interviews, consider signing up for an interview preparation course to help you with that. If you're worried about the step exam that you have no idea what's going on, talk to others who've passed the test on how they tackled it. Don't just listen to word of mouth and saying, oh, it was easy. No, I mean, a lot of these things don't come easy. It takes days and days of work and preparation to tackle. So get in contact with people that you know how they've tackled their exams. And then if you can financially, I would say invest in some courses that will help you get some of the highest scores that you possibly need, and also how to write a proper personal statement and write, essentially a lot of things about yourself that, that what these hospitals are looking for. They are looking for certain things in applicants because they're going to spend 3 years training them. So it's all just not something like up in the air. It's just, it requires preparation. So that's the second piece of advice. So please be patient. And as you're being patient, prepare well.
So I think that's wonderful advice. It's like you said earlier, it's a marathon. It's not like a sprint. It takes some time. You got to make sure that you pace yourself so you don't burn yourself out. You got to make sure that you pace yourself so you don't jump into something way before you're ready and end up failing an exam. So that's very important, like you're saying. The second one, know your enemy. That's amazing. That takes care of so many different things. If you know your enemy, you ask the right questions, you prepare yourself, you will end up with high step scores. You will end up with good letters of recommendation. You end up with a personal statement that is appropriate. You end up with a CV, which is great. And you probably end up doing well in your interviews because you planned ahead and you asked the right questions to the right people. Just those little things will take you far. Those are wonderful, man. You should be a philosopher. You could have been a philosopher in another life,
Yeah.
All right, lovely. So uh,
Thank you.
One of my videos, which people seem to, a lot of people love to watch, is I am versus family. So before we even leave, considering the fact that I am a family medicine doctor, you I am doctor who's infectious disease fellowship. Can you tell me and the audience the difference between IM and FM in your opinion?
So the number one thing that's important to both of us is that we both are physicians. It's just the scope of practice is much different in terms of what we are exposed to on a daily basis. So in internal medicine, generally, we primarily deal with patients older than the age of 18. 17 and below will fall under the domain of family medicine. Now that comes also with different types of perks as well. For family medicine, they can manage a newborn from the time they enter the world to essentially the time they're old enough to see me. Or they can even manage before a newborn appears and manage the pregnant obstetric OB patient. So they're also trained in to do surgical procedures, a lot of different types of procedures that is going to come in, very important in everyday practice. So that's essentially one of the biggest major differences. Essentially, it's scope of practice on the type of things that we see. Generally, internal medicine deals with adults, and family medicine it's in the name. It deals with the family unit. It deals with essentially being able to manage different units of the family.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's wonderful.
What do you think
No,
of it?
I completely agree with what you're saying. So internal medicine is adults, whereas family medicine is the whole family unit. If you can do OB, you don't have to do it when you're done, but you have the capability to do OB. You have the capability to see little kids. You have the capability to see geriatrics. You have the capability to see them all. Dr. Nadi, listen, it was a pleasure reminiscing with you about our struggles. You know,
Pleasure.
um, it wasn't easy to get to where we are, and looking back, it kind of just seems like a dream, but it wasn't quite because it was a struggle.
It was climbing up a mountain.
It was climbing up Mount Kilimanjaro, you know. But we made it, and hopefully people that watch this video get something out of it so that they can also climb the mountain if they have any red flags. If they don't have red flags, hopefully this gives them some pointers so that they can have an easier match season so that they can match into the place that they want to.
Right.
Dr. Nadi, listen, I really appreciate you coming on to this interview and being my very first interviewee on my YouTube channel. And hopefully I'm going to try to keep this going, get some more people to interview, and I will bring you on a little bit later so you can give us a little bit more. Thank you so much for being here.
Yep, no problem.
Dr. Safu Asante out. Dr. Nadi.
Take care.